Hello.
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 We're being a little extra goofy tonight, folks. We're just having fun. I'm Rebecca Adams, and I have Becky Vermeer with me, as I always do, and say your wonderful hello.
Hello. That was an extra special one tonight.
It was. That was
Yeah.
very extra special.
Yeah, I tried.
Becky has a great, fun topic tonight that we're going to work on. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Miss Becky.
Well, all right. So we've talked about this off camera, but we do common tactics of abuser. We do commonalities as far as we have topics where we say we must all be married to the same person, on and on and on commonalities. But one thing that we haven't talked about, and I can't believe that we haven't up until now,
I can't either.
it never even dawned on us. Isn't that
Mm-mm.
crazy?
Yeah.
There are so many myths that circulate about domestic violence. Way back when I very first started working at the crisis center, I was amazed. Every time I would go and do a speaking engagement of any kind, the questions people would ask, and they were the same questions over and over again, that were the general public's persona about what happens in abusive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just absolutely flat out not true.
Right.
So I thought it would be fun for us tonight if we had a conversation about some common myths about domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about being a little sneaky.
No, not you.
Yes, and giving you a little bit of a true and false quiz.
I think you should. I think that would be good. We'll see if I
So
pass.
you're on the spot.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep score.
All right. You do that.
I'm not really. I'm not really going to keep score.
Okay.
That would be too much for me to concentrate on.
We
But
don't want you to have to
so,
work at this. We want you to have fun.
yeah, this is going to be fun. So I'm going to give you a little true false quiz.
Okay.
And so then after you answer the question, I want us to discuss it.
Okay.
Let's discuss it and see what we think about it.
That works.
Okay. So in the normal, for lack of a better term, normal
Yeah.
abusive relationship, is it true that both partners are always abusive?
No, it is not. It's usually one person that's abusive.
That's
Mhm.
correct.
Hey.
Who is it? Who's the person that's abusive?
It's usually statistics show us that it's usually the man
Mhm.
in the relationship, but the abuser is a person who wants to have power and control over the victim, and they're in charge, basically.
Yeah. So it's possible, but typically not probable. It is possible that both people in the relationship do engage in abusive behavior.
Oh, wow. So I was wrong.
No, you're right. I mean, as
Oh,
a rule, there's one specific abuser, again, like you said, motivated by power and control, and then there is a victim in that scenario. And so that's why I say it's possible, not probable.
okay.
Possible because, and we've talked about this before in the past, where we've talked about how you get to a place as a victim where you feel motivated that it's time to fight back,
Mm-hmm.
or you feel motivated to defend yourself in a way other than the way that you've defended yourself. And so, is it possible that in a victim's attempt to defend themselves, they exercise abusive behavior? Sure. But
Okay.
let's really get to the bottom of that. Because what have we learned about abusive behavior? People who are abusive are motivated to maintain power and control over their victim, right?
Right.
If I'm already the victim, I'm not motivated to maintain power and control over my abuser.
Correct.
So it really is coming from that place of self-defense, that fight or flight,
Yeah.
the fear of being hurt, the way that we take care of ourselves. And so sometimes in an abusive relationship that can look like it. I heard someone use the expression one time, well, they're just exercising mutual abuse. And forgive me, but I was like, that is the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard in my life.
Right.
Like, you can't even use those two words together in the same sentence and that makes sense. But
No.
there are people who truly believe that it's not just one person more than the other, that it's just, and I've heard law enforcement officials say this as well. Well, next week it's going to be her hitting him. This week it's him hitting her. They just like to hit each other. And let's blanket statement that in one horribly big myth.
Right. Good.
Yeah, we've talked before about even the inequality, like even in the legal system, where if I'm in a position to defend myself and
Mhm.
I'm a female, by the time men are 13, 14, let's be honest, they're strong enough to physically overpower most women,
Mhm.
even as teenage boys. And so if I'm going to defend myself, sometimes I may have to defend myself with a weapon. We've
Mhm.
talked about that before, where you're in the kitchen and you're backed up against the counter and you maybe grab a pan just to get the person off of you. And if they're seriously injured, the penalty that that person would pay is so much stronger than the man, the abuser in the home, using fists, for example.
Mhm.
So there's even inequality in the way that that plays out. But most of the people that I see who are coming to stay at the crisis center would prefer not to be physical in that
Right.
respect.
Yeah. Have you seen or heard stories like that where they're backed into a corner and they do take something like a pan or whatever and
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so then, unfortunately, in that situation, they're charged with a stricter crime because it's considered premeditated. And they'll look at like domestic violence as a random act of violence or out of control behavior, those things that we've talked about before. But if the man is the abuser, the man is strong enough to do some serious damage with just his hands. And so, yeah, if a woman defends herself by grabbing the broom, wherever she's at, it's
Mhm.
considered premeditated because you took the time to think about grabbing a weapon before you used it.
Okay. But that has nothing to do with the fact that he already had this premeditated what he was going to do.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
let's clear up that myth right now.
Thank you.
Typically, both partners are not abusive. Typically, there's one person, again, motivated to maintain power and control. And then there's the object of that power and control, which we call, for lack of a better term, the victim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So far, you're batting 1,000.
Okay. Woo-hoo.
Let's see. Men are the only perpetrators of abuse.
Wrong.
Why?
Women can abuse also. The statistics show that it's not as frequent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of piggybacks up over what we just talked about.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a whole lot more clarification that needs to come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's one. Abusers wouldn't abuse if their victims wouldn't provoke them.
Don't make me laugh. That is false because the victims do not provoke them. They choose and have premeditated that they're going to do it. And they have probably worked out the whole scenario to make her frustrated enough to where she does or says a certain thing that he knows she's going to do. And then he turns around and blames it on her, and it's not her fault in the beginning. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
I heard you or somebody say recently would look at the sleeping spouse and say, oh, what can I do to make his day special today? Well, turn that around. The abuser would look at the sleeping spouse or the sleeping partner and say, what can I do today to throw my power around and abuse her?
Exactly.
Which is just blew my mind on that one, when I heard that, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's what my ex did. And I didn't even realize it, didn't know it. Just so, I don't know, it's like looking through a cloudy window. You can't see.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Well, and I've even talked about that. Like, I'll even take it further. Let's say that let's take domestic violence out of it for a second. well, I mean, it's eventually going to come back to that, but let's not even focus on the fact that we're in an abusive relationship right now. Let's focus on the fact that we have two people having a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
In an abusive relationship, those people do not have equal power. In theory, and in a relationship that's not abusive, people do have equal power. So let's focus on the equal power relationship for a second. Let's say there's two people in an equal relationship and they're having a discussion that turns into a debate, that turns into a flat out verbal argument that escalates and escalates and escalates. And let's say that the woman in that situation comes to the male partner and gets right up in his face and says something. Even then, I don't care if you're right in somebody's face, even doing like this, that does not give anyone the authority to lay hands on another person.
I agree.
So there's no such thing as provoking someone into being an abuser. I'm responsible for my behavior. You're responsible for your behavior. If I get up in your face and I shake my finger in your face and I scream and yell at you, I'm responsible for exercising bad behavior. The consequence for exercising bad behavior is not being punched in the face.
Right.
It's just not.
Right.
And so, you know, in any relationship, in a bar fight, same scenario. If one person in the bar fight is threatening the other person, even then, it does not justify throwing a punch. It just does not.
Right.
And so if you're somebody who is not motivated by power and control, somebody who learns how to take ownership of your actions, you have to find yourself in that position and say, I need to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't, something bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't walk away, even then, that person's not provoking you. You're making a choice to stay and have an altercation.
Mm-hmm.
By saying that by saying that victims provoke abusers into abusing, 100% takes the responsibility for the abuser's behavior off the abuser.
Ooh, yes, bingo. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because if you wouldn't have said, or if you wouldn't have done, or if you wouldn't have looked at me like that, then I wouldn't have had to hit you.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line is, you have no right to hit anybody ever.
Exactly.
Ever.
Yeah.
So we need to carry it that far.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got. I'm trying to change up the way I ask the questions, and that's what's stopping me. Because there's no way to change these into true statements.
But see, I can see your wheels turning in your head.
Yeah.
And that crafty little twinkle in your eye. Even though you're looking at a piece of paper, I can still see there's a crafty little twinkle in your eye.
The survivor typically exaggerates about their abuse.
No. In fact, if they do anything, they minimize it and they won't tell the extreme of it or all the details of it at first because they've got to, I mean, it just sounds so bizarre that they've got to test the waters with a little bit of it. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, like I say, the reasonable mind tries to make reason out of unreasonable behavior.
Mm-hmm.
There's that.
Yeah.
But then how many times have you heard me say in this scenario, we have to focus on 3 specific words: minimization, justification, and rationalization.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 biggies when it comes to this particular statement. So exaggerating the abuse is the contrary of all 3 of those, because you're exactly right. I hear statements all the time of, well, he didn't really hit me that hard, I just bruise easily.
Mm-hmm.
Or he didn't mean to do that, he was angry and he was gonna punch the wall, but he accidentally hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Or the story I told in several episodes ago about the person with saying they had PTSD and waking up from the dream and hitting the other person in the bed and saying it was because they were in the war.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the justification there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've even had abusers, or I'm sorry, victims that do want to take a little bit of ownership of that behavior. Well, I really was back talking. I really was egging it on. And, you know, I have a really hard time when we're talking about two people in an equal partnership saying I was back talking. I've heard of kids who backtalk their parents, and in a parent-child relationship, there is the assumption that the parent has a little bit of authority over the kid.
Mm-hmm.
But in an equal partnership, do you really backtalk?
I think you're expressing yourself.
Right? Isn't that just called talking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Having a conversation. And so even if I get a little frustrated or nitpicky or whatever, it's not backtalking.
Yeah. That's a good
That just
point.
blows my mind. And so even that statement, it puts the abuser in a position of power over
Mhm.
the victim just by the statement.
Yeah.
Well, don't backtalk. Don't sass me. Have you heard that? Don't
Yeah.
sass me.
Uh-huh.
I've heard people say that to their kids because their kids were sassy.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know in that part in an equal partnership that it's sassy
Right.
in that tone. You know what I mean? I mean, I can be sassy as the best of them, but in that particular scenario, I don't think it's acceptable for the
Right.
abuser to say that to the victim. You're just being sassy, so I had to put you in your place, or I had to punish you, or or whatever else.
Mhm.
I
And
have a
that
really hard time with that.
and that brings up one that I've had is that somebody said, well, that wife was being really like out of control behavior. They were talking about a movie
Mhm.
that pretty big name movie from several years ago, and they said, "Yeah, but you got to admit she was being pretty testy. He had every right to spank her, and he literally threw
McClintock?
her
Are you
over."
talking about McClintock?
Yes, yes. I didn't know if you know that movie, and I just looked at her and I said, "No, he didn't." I mean, yes, she
No,
would be testy, but she didn't deserve that. He had no right
no.
to do that.
No, and I mean, let's talk about that for a second, because in that particular scene in the movie, not only was there that, but there was also public humiliation
Yes,
because he did it in front of a crowd of people.
yes, exactly.
It's incredibly degrading and inappropriate.
Yeah. I agree. And I don't agree with her behavior. I mean, the way they had her portray that character,
Yeah,
throughout the movie. I mean, she was quite the little snob, but and she was very rude. But there's just no excuse for that, for him
no,
turning her over his knee.
no.
Mm-mm.
I'm trying to think. A friend of mine just posted an article on Facebook in the past week that was in 1940s or 1950s, like in op-eds from the newspaper, and there was three gentlemen in there talking about why they think it's acceptable to spank their wives, and when they get out of control, of course it's okay, or sometimes they misbehave and they need to be put back in their place or whatever else. And I was like, Lord have mercy.
Good grief. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Well, it's
Oh.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous that
Hmm.
we've perpetuated that as a society, that that's behavior is acceptable, and I mean that needs to go away. So
Yeah.
yeah. And so I don't think at all that survivors exaggerate their abuse. I think they try everything in their power to cover it up, or
Yeah.
to say it didn't happen, or it wasn't that bad, or he didn't mean to, and to justify the behavior. And I still think it falls back to one, survival, because the abuser says to the victim all of the time, if you tell anybody, I'll hurt you.
Yeah.
Or, there's a threat of I'll kill you, even, like there's those kind of threats that take place. And so there's that. And so it's safer
Hmm.
to hide it, or to cover it up, or to justify it, or whatever else.
Hmm. Or they'll say, I'll kill your dog or your
Mhm,
parents or your siblings or whatever. I mean,
mhm.
there's no limit as to what they'll threaten.
Right.
Hmm.
And the challenging thing about being in a relationship with someone who's an abuser is 99.9% of the time, if they say they will, they do. They're going to do it. And
Hmm.
so, unfortunately, survivors in those situations, or if they're still victims in that situation, learn when the abuser says, I'm going to do this, they're going to do it. So I
Hmm.
better not do that, because I don't want that to happen to me.
Hmm.
Yeah. So What do you think about this? The survivor knew what they were getting into at the start of the relationship.
No. I didn't even have to let you finish your question. No, because they're Mr. Charming.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they win over the victim in the first place. And they want it to be a quick marriage or a quick whatever, and so that they can all of a sudden become comfortable in the relationship, and then it can begin.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my story. How many times have you heard me say this? If you went out with a person on the first date, we just met, we're having our first date, we had a pleasant evening, you walk me to the front door, and I think you're leaning in for a kiss, and instead of leaning in for a kiss, you punch me in the face.
Right.
Am I going to go out with you again?
Right. No.
No, I'm done. Like,
So you
I'm
lost your
probably going to
victim
call
right
the
there.
police.
Mhm.
I'll probably call the police and we're done.
Yeah. So you just lost your victim. So no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So no, and quite the contrary again on this one is most abusive relationships start as loving, caring relationships.
They do. Or
And
at least
so the
at least
victim never saw it coming.
right. At least it looks to her, if she's, especially if she's not familiar with red flags,
Right.
she's not going to see that it's anything but loving and caring.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yeah. Let's see.
Folks, you know about Becky's questions. They're Lulus, let me tell you.
If a victim wanted the abuse to stop, they just leave.
Yeah, right. False. That's a
Why is that false?
You don't just leave an abusive relationship, you have to escape. It's the risk of the abuser becoming more violent increases if you leave. That's one thing. But another thing is, and I heard this when I heard right after JC Lee Dugard had gotten free from her abuser, and her counselor was there, and the interviewer asked, they said, well, you know, why didn't she just leave? And I used to be able to remember to quote what that counselor had said. And I'm not going to do it justice probably, but she said, the power and control that they maintained over the victim is so strong that they don't even have to have them tied down or in handcuffs or anything like that. They know that if they even think about doing anything out of the ordinary, they are going to get it. And that can vary from one extreme to another, but they know they are in big trouble if they rattle the cage that much that they're going to just try to escape. It doesn't work.
Yeah, an old statistic, and I haven't researched this particular statistic for a while, so don't set it in stone. But an old statistic said that they are at an 88% greater risk of being killed if they leave their abuser. So again, you know, even in that fight or flight, I want to survive. Survival means staying with the abuser, which doesn't make sense. No. Because staying with the abuser doesn't look like survival. But, and we've talked about that video I told you before. What was that called? Defending Our Lives, of the multiple women who had left their abuser, they had tried to get away or had gotten away, but just because they got away did not mean that the abuser was done abusing. Yeah. You know, the word escape needs to be a word that's highlighted and on all capitals. You don't just leave. If you could just leave, you would. Like if I go to a horrible movie, I can just leave. Yeah. If I decide not to stay, I can just leave, and there's nobody that's going to tell me that I have to sit there because I bought a ticket, for example. Right. I can just leave. Or if I go to a friend's house and they're getting out of hand with their partying or whatever else, and I don't want to be involved, I can just leave. That's easy. And get this, in a quote unquote normal relationship, if for whatever reason that's not working for me, I could just leave. Legally, even, we have grounds for that to happen. I could just leave.
Yep.
But in abusive relationships, just leaving does not equate good things.
No.
It can equate loss of children. It can equate loss of property. It can equate loss of life. It is definitely an escape that needs to happen in that situation.
Yeah, it has to be either a off the cuff, great opportunity out the door, or it requires a lot of planning and thinking and waiting for that special moment to be able to escape.
Yeah. And sometimes even then, all the planning that's gone into it, sometimes even then it doesn't work. Like, again, to go back to that video I told you about, those people had successfully escaped. But until the abuser decides the abuser is done, there is no successful escape, because they will follow, they will stalk, they will hunt, they will torment, all of those things.
Yeah.
That's why I used to tell people when I was running support groups all the time, welcome to the Strongest Women in the World Club, because you've escaped. You've escaped from this person, and you're exercising the strength by even coming in here and talking about it and receiving education and focusing on making a change for your life. The strength that takes is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When we talk about Wonder Woman, those are Wonder Women. 100%.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing I was really afraid of. You were mentioning some things earlier. I knew he was going to stalk, because he already was while we were still together. He was stalking the children and I. And I knew that I would really stand a chance of losing them. And I knew that they would have to, spend time with him as well as with me. And I couldn't stand the thought of that. And there were so many circumstances. I knew he was still going to exercise power and control over the kids and over myself, even if I tried to escape. There was just no way around it. And I knew until the youngest one was 18, I would have no chance, and he still continued even after I did escape and the kids had all graduated. He still continued to stalk them, and he continued to stalk me. It didn't stop.
Yeah.
And I'm talking for years, getting on my son's social media and stalking them there, when he lost track of where they lived. And yeah, it's gotten pretty ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's even
firsthand
remarried.
experience. Sorry?
Yeah. And he's even remarried. Yeah.
And still tormenting you.
I know that if he could find out anything about me, he would. So this was a risky thing for me to do the YouTube channel and even show my face, with the name, and put it out there, because all those years I would not allow anyone to take my picture and associate it with my book or my name. Yeah. So I know he would feel as though he had won if he, if he found out anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that brings up an interesting point when you talk about that he remarried and he still doesn't pass up a chance to torment if he can. And so, we've talked about that before, where not all men are abusive. Not all men are abusive, but what we know is a handful of men abuse multiple people. That's what happened, or a handful of abusers. I'm trying not to be gender specific, but we got to be honest, it's a gender-based issue. And so we will see like an abuser have a situation where a victim has escaped and they've gone on and they've gotten away. And so the abuser starts a new relationship because a typical abuser does not like to be alone. So they're going to jump into the next relationship as quickly as they can. But let's just say the victim who escapes, they were in a 10-year marriage, and that victim gets out. The abuser instantly jumps into a new relationship. Well, let's say the victim in that relationship is like, yeah, I'm not staying here. We're not even going to build a foundation because you're a jerk and I'm out. So 6 months later, he finds himself alone again. Guess what's going to happen? He's not going to chase the person that was around for 6 months. He's going to go back and torment the person that was in a relationship for 10 years with him. And so that person may have moved on their own self and maybe even has a new relationship or whatever else, but that does not mean that the abuser is completely letting it go and it's not going to torment or stalk or harass or disturb the peace of that person.
And there you go back to, you can't make sense out of it, something that doesn't make sense. There's no way you can.
Yeah, there's no way that you can.
I've been listening to, while I work, I've been listening a lot to the Brian Koberger case, because it was referred to me because of the possible link with the BTK killings. And it's just very interesting because then the different places that I'm listening to this information will bring in psychologists and psychiatrists, and they'll talk about, you know, the different scenarios and the different diagnoses for the different things. And it's just been so freeing, really, to hear my ex-husband being described.
Yeah.
In
and
the
that's something.
Yeah, in the realm of like sociopath or psychopath and these kind of things. And it's oh wow, it's interesting. It really helps me. Yeah, it helps validate even more. And here we are doing a YouTube channel about this.
Right.
Yeah, but it's very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of falls back to that thing that I've always found fascinating, where sitting in a support group, somebody will say, we must all be married to the same guy. Like that phenomena still fascinates me, that this many years later, I still hear people say that. I heard people say that many years ago, and I'm still hearing people say it now. And so, you know, I used to jokingly say there must be a how to be abusive handbook out there somewhere. We need to get that recalled. Like, why are we still passing this book around?
Right.
But it's amazing to me, you know, when we talk about those common traits, they just are.
They are.
They just are.
Folks, make sure that you subscribe to our channel so you know when these videos come out. And it helps if you go ahead and hit the like button so that YouTube can get the word out a little bit faster. And feel free to spread the word. You know, you can hit that share icon and share that with somebody. And thank you, Becky, for your expertise again. We love it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're a team now, so
that's true.
Folks, remember that no matter where you are in the process, you're always free to soar.